Pot odds are one of the first concepts players learn in poker, and they feel mathematical, objective, and reliable, which is exactly why they can become dangerous. Most players do not misunderstand pot odds, they overtrust them. They treat pot odds as a command, as if the math itself is telling them what action to take. But that is not what pot odds do. Pot odds do not tell you to call. They never have. All they explain is how often a hand would need to win for a call to break even. That is the entire function. There is no recommendation, no permission, and no guarantee. Only a threshold that describes what must be true for a call to make sense. Over time, many players began turning that threshold into a rule. They see the price, calculate the percentage, and once their hand appears to have enough equity, the decision feels finished. The math seems to speak for itself, and that is where the mistake begins. Pot odds answer only one narrow question, which is how often a hand needs to win. They do not answer the more important question of whether it actually will. Those two ideas are not interchangeable. It is possible to have the correct price and still be drawing dead. You can meet the required equity on paper and still have no realistic way to realize it in practice, because poker equity is not theoretical. It is conditional, and it depends on ranges rather than individual cards. Consider a river decision, where there are no more cards to come and no future equity to realize. Pot odds might indicate that you need to win 25% of the time for a call to break even, but that number has no meaning on its own. What matters is whether your opponent is bluffing at least that often. If they are not, the call is losing regardless of how attractive the price appears. This is where players justify calls by pointing to the math, saying the pot odds were too good to pass up. But pot odds never force action. They do not override logic or compel decisions. They only reveal whether a call is mathematically possible, not whether it is strategically correct. The mistake happens when players skip the middle step. They calculate the price, but never evaluate the range. They fail to ask which hands are betting, which ones are value bets, which ones are bluffs, and how often those bluffs actually occur. Without that analysis, pot odds become clean numbers attached to no real information. Pot odds without range analysis are like knowing the odds of rain without knowing whether you are outside. The math may be correct, but it is not useful. This is why two players can face the same bet with the same hand and reach different conclusions. One focuses on price, while the other focuses on composition. One asks whether the call is cheap enough, and the other asks what the hand is realistically beating. Only one of those approaches leads to consistent profit. Pot odds do not create winning calls. They only confirm them after the logic already exists. First, you identify possible bluffs, then you estimate their frequency, and only after that do pot odds tell you whether the math supports the decision, never before. This is also why many losing calls feel justified. They were not emotional, they were mathematical, but math applied in the wrong order is still a mistake. The calculation was correct, but the reasoning was not. Strong players do not use pot odds to decide whether to call. They use pot odds to verify whether their reasoning holds up. That difference may sound subtle, but it is significant. One treats math as a crutch, while the other treats it as a filter. Pot odds are not instructions, they are constraints. They describe what must be true for a call to make sense. And if those conditions are not met, no price is good enough. Once you understand this, calling becomes harder but cleaner. You stop looking for permission and start looking for evidence. When the evidence is not there, folding becomes straightforward, even when the pot is large and the price looks tempting. Pot odds do not tell you what to do. They tell you what would have to be true for doing it to be correct. That distinction separates players who sound logical from players who actually are. I'm Alex Mercer. That's the spot.